So the way I define value for a partnership or a client, really, I think it does change slightly, but really I think thematically value, it's critical. Are we delivering something that actually creates meaningful change for a client, right, for their business? So how do we deliver that? And I think value can be in a few different ways. One certainly is from an investment mindset, where we think about delivering savings, and that can be hard or soft savings. So do you think about, is it savings via additional creative solutions or support, if that's an area where the client needs that support? Is it additional research that can help them gain some kind of insight to, again, affect changes, positive change in their business, so they can really think about how do we reach our consumers, our audience in the right way to drive that impact that we need. And I think that, of course, the client first, and then that drives how we really think about our partnerships and what the value is that we need from them. I think those are more of the standard sense of value, again, from that investment mindset. But the reality is there's also the value in a partnership, and that relationship it's a different approach, right? It's more that interpersonal dynamic, and the value that really comes from there are, can you trust one another? Is there open dialogue? And at the end of the day, it should tie back to those firmer values of, and are we going to be able to deliver results because of the way that we're engaging and having healthy conversations to think about the client's business and those needs. So really always keeping those at the core, I think, regardless of who we're speaking to, is the right way that we have to think about the value. But then what that value actually looks like, of course, again, whether it's numerical or something else, some kind of support that the clients or we need, that's a different lens in how we go about creating those relationships and partnerships.
So speaking of value and maybe values, flexibility has a universal cachet for everyone, and particularly when it comes to transactions, we always think of everyone wants something frictionless, whether it's consumers or advertising partners. So with that in mind, with that universal value in mind, what does flexibility look like in practice?
So I'm glad that you brought the consumer up into that question about flexibility, because I think that first and foremost, they do expect a frictionless experience. And we know that every additional step that we create, or every second that it takes additional for someone to get to what they want, we lose them, right? They drop off, and we don't want that to happen. So I think thinking about that ultimate consumer experience is critical in every step of it. But flexibility, when again thinking from more that partnership mindset and what we're trying to bring forward for the clients, is really making sure that we're transacting on the inventory in the place and at the time that's going to, again, create that impact that we need to drive, whether it's a campaign KPI, but hopefully something bigger, right? Yes, the campaign KPIs are critical, but they should also be something that's going to deliver on the business results and needs for our clients. So I do think that the flexibility there and where we actually access the inventory is critical, right? It allows us to layer on more data, find the right individual, and drive that real result. But the other part is also just in terms of, I think beyond the transaction point, it's also in terms of course, we want flexible deals, so we can think about, where does the inventory shift to, not just where we purchase it, but what type of inventory we're accessing. If something's changing, if there are cultural shifts, if there's a difference in the client's business, we want to actually be able to move along with that. And that might mean, we want to actually shift the inventory that we have to something else. So we do look to our partners to say, where can we be flexible? And there's other things too that come into that, but I think flexibility has many different sub-levers to it. But overall, it is a critical part of our relationships, and I think what we bring forward to clients.
Another commonality between consumers and business is the idea that we're in a data-first world, and that can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming for consumers, and again, it can be overwhelming for agencies and marketers and partners. So how do you balance relevancy and content without overwhelming consumers?
So the way I think about balancing relevancy and content is first, remember that those are really broad themes, but they're also easy places to rest our heads. So if we start to get overwhelmed with data and we're like, what does it all mean? Just remember, look for what is relevant to the consumer or the audience we want to speak to, and does it also align with your brand and the message we're trying to put out there? So I think when we re-simplify something, and I think we can overcomplicate things in our world of data, which, don't get me wrong, I love it. I think the details matter, but I think that the data is there to help guide us and then also to support the decisions or let us know if it's not the right decision. But at the end of the day, that relevancy factor, it has a feeling to it too. It's not just about data, it's about understanding, does this work for the brand and the voice that we want out there? Having a lot of entertainment accounts actually within Mediahub, that's really critical because we have to think about it from the marketer perspective as well as the ad buyer perspective. And that content and that relevancy drives culture as well. So we want to be part of the conversation. We want to be driving the conversation. And that's a really, I think, fun way to think about it. and remembering that when we do start to overcomplicate with data, what are we actually trying to do? So that relevancy piece is important, but again, the data is there to enable that it's the right audience and right individual that we're reaching. So yeah.
So lastly, Steve, video has been a central component of advertising. It's assumed the gravitational center of the advertising world in a lot of ways, but audio is having a moment right now. It's still big. How do you see audio in terms of its place in the media mix?
Sure. I think that audio is in a lot of ways an underutilized space. I've always had an affinity toward audio. I think we know the results are there. It shows it's a very engaged audience, very leaned in. People are really trying to digest the content and hear what's being said or sung or whatever that it may be. And I think at the end of the day, audio has always been part of it. Audio is part of video too, right? Are we listening or watching with sound on? And if we're not, of course, having those messages overlaid. But I think that audio has always been a really important driver of results and a huge part of the media mix that I think has been in some ways overlooked. So I think though we're seeing obviously the huge numbers coming when it comes to podcasting and things like that. So the data's there, the numbers are there. We know people are, even as individuals, right? Like we're probably listening and taking part. I think it's thinking about though the different strategy. I do also think though with some of the tools for building out ads, it's making it a lot more accessible for clients to think about how they create ads and content for audio channels. So I think that's really an important enabler to allow it to be unlocked a bit more. And I think it's just think about it as part of the mix, right? Like what are we actually trying to achieve with it? If we're thinking about foot traffic and things like that into a store or a restaurant, well, that's a great way when we're aligning with that, right? And people are on the move. So it has its use case, and it's much broader than that, obviously. There's so many different ways to utilize audio. And I think there's a lot of powerful voices in audio too. So remember that, and I think hearing that voice, that trusted voice when you're listening matters to consumers.